Ok. Buenas noches a todos, sean bienvenidos a una sesión más de teoría de la adquisición de una segunda lengua por la profesora Olga Salazar. Para el buen desarrollo de esta sesión les pedimos seguir las siguientes recomendaciones. Las sesiones se graban. Pueden verlas nuevamente en la plataforma virtual. Les solicitamos que por favor silencien sus micrófonos y puedan activarlos cuando quieran hacer consultas o aportes con el permiso del docente. Les pedimos que mantengan su cámara activa. De no poder hacerlo, enviar su excusa por el chat de Zoom. De lo contrario, será retirado de la sesión y les serán restados puntos en la heterovaloración del docente. Mi rol como moderador es facilitar y apoyar en la parte técnica. Consultas por el chat personal o general. Les exhorto a tener bolígrafo y papel para hacer sus anotaciones y aprovechar al máximo esta sesión. Esta sesión tiene un tiempo de duración de 120 minutos.
Gracias. Ok, voy a esperar 5 minutos para ver si llega alguno de los estudiantes y comienzo la clase.
Ok, profe.
Okay, let's start. So for today we have another approach called content-based instructions. So this approach is focused on content-based instruction is to increase the students' interest, engagement, and motivation. So CBI move away from traditional language learning and focuses on different topics to practice language skills. So content-based teaching differs from traditional language classes because language comes second to the content. So the first thing in this approach is the subject, the content, the topic. And in the second place is to acquire language skills. So this is different for the others approach that we have learned so far because this is based on content. So it will be interesting to talk about this approach. Let's see a video about this approach. Give me a second. Give me a moment. Okay, perfect. Let's watch the video. Okay, listen. So as you see here in the video, it said that this approach is focused on learning about something. It could be the topic of the subject, the topic of the book, but is based on content rather than learning the target language in this case, or in our case, it will be language, English language. So it says here that, okay, here. You can learn to discipline through this approach. So this means that you can learn, for example, history, and at the same time, you can learn English because you are learning history through English language. A good example of this kind of approach is some schools that have a specific teacher for a specific subject, like mathematics. So you are learning math through English teacher. So you are learning English as well. So, content-based instruction refer to an approach to second language teaching. So, let it say here, okay. It is used the language they are trying to learn. Focuses on the topic or subject matter. The language is a tool for developing knowledge and to develop ability in the target language and organize around content or information. So, what does it mean, the word content? Contents refer to the fact, concepts, vocabulary, theory that we learn in the class, in the lesson, or in the classrooms. So the content will be the subject or the book, the topic of the book, the topic of the lesson. That is the content. So let me give you a background about this approach. So content-based approach has been in academic circles since the 80s. It is gaining popularity and an effective form of teaching. Content-based instruction is a teaching approach where learning study language through meaningful content. It motivates students to learn because the subject matter is interesting and allows them to apply their learning language skills in a different context instead of relying on memorizing vocabulary. So it is not like a traditional class. Okay, so this approach, they use the language as a means of acquiring information rather than as an aim in itself. CBI better reflect learning need for learning a second language. So the analysis here is that this approach, the most important thing is the content, is the information that the teacher wants to teach and know to learn English. Okay, let's see this video.
CBI, Content-Based Instruction, Basic Concepts. As we begin our 8-week journey towards better content-based instruction, CBI practices, we should make sure that we have a shared understanding of the most basic terms and concepts. Content-based instruction and its cousins. The first term that we need to define is the term content. Within the field of language acquisition, the term content is used to describe any subject matter besides languages. This might be, for example, math, history, or science. In the context of this course, we are using the term content-based instruction, CBI, to describe classroom-based instruction where the content is taught in a language that the students are still in the process of learning. In our case, this is EFL. This American English e-teacher course was built with the assumption that most participants would teach CBI courses in which the language learning objectives were equally important as the content learning objectives. This is certainly not the case in all CBI courses. In fact, the term CBI has been used in some contexts to refer to classes whose primary goal was to teach the students a new language. Despite this, we use the term CBI in this course in the broader sense, described above. There are other CBI programs where the content learning objectives are the primary focus. This is true of many university classes where content experts teach about their area of expertise in EFL. A more specific term to refer to this kind of program is the term English Medium Instruction, or EMI. Another common term for referring to CBI programs is the term CLIL, or Content and Language Integrated Learning. CLIL is the term that is used more often in Europe. As we are defining CBI in this course, CLIL and CBI refer to the same thing. Language learning. Most EFL classes teach students new words to express things that they already know how to express in their first language. In CBI classes, by contrast, it is often not only the words that are new to our students, but also the concepts that they express. Additionally, we teach them to do new, more academic activities with language. When we teach students to debate, for example, or write a compare and contrast essay, we are asking them to express themselves in English in ways they have never done before. As it turns out, it is a lot easier to learn the language that you need to have a social conversation. Using language to perform academic tasks and communicate about academic subjects is much more difficult. The author who is known for identifying this difference is Jim Cummins. Cummins worked with immigrant children in the United States who were placed into content classes taught in English. Cummins noted that many children quickly mastered social interactions in English while still facing serious linguistic challenges at school for many more years. Cummins coined terms to describe these two kinds of language acquisition. BICS, Basic Interpersonal Communicative Skills, refers to conversational fluency in a language, while CALP, Cognitive Academic Language Proficiency, refers to students' ability to understand and express, in both oral and written modes, concepts and ideas that are relevant to success in school. While BICS can often develop fairly quickly, CALP is known to take between 5 and 7 years to develop fully. Learning content. Learning new concepts and new language at the same time presents CBI students with a dual challenge. As teachers, we have to keep in mind that people can only think about so many things at once. Our working memory is limited. The term cognitive load refers to how much mental work a task requires. Cognitive load theory recommends that learning tasks be created so as not to overload learners' working memory. As CBI instructors, this means that we must be aware of which parts of our tasks are difficult, and we need to structure lessons so that students are always focused and able to achieve the objectives we put before them. One of the best ways to lighten the cognitive load of a learning task is to frame lessons within concepts and routines that are familiar to the students. As CBI teachers, we can facilitate our students' learning when we relate new lessons to ideas that students already comprehend, and we frame our activities in routines that students can settle into with little need for orientation. These familiar scripts, routines, or patterns are called schemata. We can see our schemata operating when we go to a restaurant. We know what a waiter is likely to ask us when he comes to our table, and this helps us know how to respond. even if we cannot hear the waiter very well. Familiar classroom routines serve a similar facilitating function for CBI students. Conclusion. This reading introduced you to several terms that you should become familiar with. Content, content-based instruction, CBI, English medium instruction, EMI, content and language integrated learning, CLIL, basic interpersonal communicative skills, BICS, cognitive academic language proficiency, CALP, cognitive load, and schemata. It also briefly discussed some applications of these ideas to lesson design. Here are the references used for this presentation. And here are some suggested further reading.
Okay, let's continue with the lesson. Okay, let's talk about theory of this language. So CBA language is a vehicle for learning context, study a textual and discourse structures. Language is drawn on integrate skills. CBI activities link the skill in a way that can bring together knowledge and language. Language is purposeful. Language is used for a specific purpose. Learners should be clear in the purpose on and language code. Okay, theory of learning. People learn a second language more successfully when they use the language as a means of acquiring information rather than as an end itself. People learn second language most successfully when the information they acquire is perceived as interesting, useful. Students learn best when instruction addresses students' needs. Teaching builds on the previous experience of the learners. So, how could be a lesson with content-based instructions? So, in the first, let's talk about some objectives and main objective of this approach, and then we are going to talk about how it could be a lesson with content or based in content-based instructions. So the objectives in this kind of lesson is language learning is based on the learning of content. Objective will be focused on the content of the course or of the book. The main objective is to activate and develop existing English language skill and to acquire learning skill and strategies that could be applied in the future to help the student understand English speaking. So the syllabus or topic syllabus, a specific topic and subtopic, of course, of the lesson. So reflect student interest, create transition on certain skill, vocabulary, structures, and concepts. So design, let's talk about the roles. So the learner role, it means the student. Understand their own learning process, work on collaborate mode of learning, CBI, learning by doing, being active interpreters of input and find other learning strategies. The role of the teacher, master in the subject matter. Keep in mind the context in order for the student to understand their planning and presentation. select and adapt authentic materials, create a learning-centered classroom. So the teacher has to be trained and orientated. Balance between language and content. Watch out when selecting and adapting materials. Develop content-specific language teaching. Teachers should vary the format of classroom, organize teamwork, organize jigsaw when reading, use approach about processing in writing, use error correction technique, maintaining a student's self-esteem. The role of the material, relation with the subject matter on the content course, rich variety of material, comprehensible input, authentic, technical journals, newspaper, radio, book, broadcast, everything that can need or can help the student. So let me move, give me a moment. Okay, here. What does content-based instruction lesson look like? There are many ways to approach creating CBI lesson. This is one of possible ways. Of course, it have to be a first step, that is the preparation. So choose the subject of interest to the student, find 3 or 4 suitable sources that deal with different aspects of the subject. It could be website, reference book, audio, or video lecture, or even real people. So during the lesson, divide the class into a small group and assign each group a small research task and source of information to use to help them to fulfill the task. Then, once they have done their research, they form new groups with the students that use other information, source and share and compare the information. There should then be some products, and the end of result of this sharing of information they can present like a report, like a summarize about the topic or the task that they were developing. Okay, let's look like a lesson about vocabulary instruction in context-based instruction. Let's see. So, like a review about what we have talked about a lesson. Remember that the first is the preparation. You select the topic, you select the research or the book or any information that can help the student. Then they work in group. They divide information, they discuss the information, and then they present a report about all the information that they have researched and learned. So let's see the vocabulary. The vocabulary lesson look like when we use content-based instruction. Let's see.
Controla la caída de tu cabello con el nuevo Sábila con sábila y colágeno.
Reúne todo el poder natural de la sábila con la tecnología del colágeno.
Vocabulary instruction.
Give me a moment. Okay, let's see a vocabulary instruction in CBI.
Instruction in CBI. Vocabulary is central to teaching and learning a language. Without sufficient vocabulary, language learners cannot express themselves and understand others. The development of vocabulary plays a crucial role for students of content-based instruction, as vocabulary development directly impacts their academic achievement by meeting both content and language learning objectives. CBI students need to learn general English vocabulary for communication, and they must also learn terms that are specific to the content areas they are studying. As we saw earlier in this module, in the reading on second language acquisition, L2 acquisition requires meaningful, contextualized, and communicative language practice. To develop the rich contextual environment that enhances learning, CBI teaching must further be supported by strategies and activities that actively involve the participants and have the following characteristics: repetitive, hands-on, progress from simple to complex, and equally focused on all the skills of language development: listening, speaking, reading, and writing. Repetition. In order to commit new words to long-term memory, a learner must be exposed to several repetitions of the word. The more times a person is exposed to a word, the more likely and quicker he or she will be able to reproduce the word on demand. This is especially true if exposures to words are spaced apart in time. Another reason why vocabulary learning requires several different encounters with each word is because there are many layers of information that one must learn in order to truly know a word. There are numerous things to know about a word, namely its form, spoken, written, and its component affixes and stem, its meaning, underlying concept, particular instantiations and associations, and its use, collocations, grammatical patterns, and constraints on its use. Hands-on. How many times have we complained that in most of our science laboratory sessions, we were never allowed to touch the chemicals or only observed the teacher mixing the chemicals? Similar to the way this practice impacted our abilities to conduct an experiment and understand the concept, when learners are not given an opportunity to play or experiment with the language, they do not develop the competency to use the language in multiple contexts. Simple to complex. Repetition is essential, but repeating the same activity multiple times will not continue contributing to vocabulary building, because after some time, it will become predictable. To make sure that activities promote learning while being engaging, learners must be exposed to various tasks that are challenging for them. When learners are first learning a word, recalling the word requires significant mental effort. Therefore, the tasks they do with the words should be simple at this stage. As the learner becomes more and more familiar with a word, recognizing and producing the word represent less and less cognitive load. At this stage, the learner is able to perform more complex tasks while using the new vocabulary. Equally focused: listening, speaking, reading, and writing. Given their primarily academic nature, CBI activities are frequently dominated by reading and writing tasks, with little listening and speaking practice. This results in handicapping the CBI students and leaving them unprepared to use the L2 in day-to-day communicative activities such as watching a movie or carrying on a casual conversation on the street. Hence, while planning lessons and activities, we need to make sure that we are focusing equally on all four skills. Conclusion. To summarize, learning happens efficiently in an environment where the participants are given the opportunity to participate and experience things. Thus, Activities must not be isolated or happen just once in the classroom. Vocabulary building activities must be brought into the daily routine, and they should increase in complexity over time and provide ample practice not only in reading and writing, but in speaking and listening too. These are the references used for this text.
So content and learning is based on reading and writing. And in the second place, listening and speaking. But so we have to use the four skills in the equally four. They have to be used in equally. Okay, let's continue. Okay, what are the advantages on content-based instruction, So it can make learning language more interesting and motivated. A student can use the language to fulfill real purpose, which can make a student both more independent and confident. A student can also develop a much wider knowledge of the world through CBI, which can feed back into improving and supporting their general educational needs. CBI is very popular among English for academic purpose teachers, as it helps the student to develop evaluate study skills such as note-taking, summarizing, and extracting key information from text. Taking information from different sources, evaluating and restructuring that information can help a student to develop very thinking skills that can then be transferred to other subjects. What are the potential problems when we use content-based instruction? Because CBA isn't explicitly focuses on language learning, some students may feel confused or maybe even feel that they aren't improving their language skill. Deal with this by including some form of language focusing follow-up exercises to help draw attention to linguistic features within the materials and consolidate any difficult vocabulary or grammar points. So we have this kind of trouble when we teach math, because you want that the student learn math, but you use English like my first language to teach. So they can feel confused because they want to learn math, but you are speaking in English. So it's very difficult because they have to understand the English language and then understand the math lesson. So it is really confused when we work with youngers, I mean primary schools. Okay, let's see. The factors.
CBI success factors.
Let's see some
CBI success factors.
that can success when we are giving or teaching a lesson with CBI.
CBI programs can achieve the dual goal of improving students' proficiency in the language of study, the target language, and the content knowledge they study. The majority of studies find that students in long-term CBI programs perform as well as or better than their peers in both the target language and the content material. This text reviews factors that have been found to influence the quality and success of CBI programs. As we saw in CBI Basic Concepts, CBI programs vary in terms of learning goals. In some CBI programs, language learning and content learning are considered equally important. In other CBI programs, the primary motivation is to improve students' language proficiency. In EMI contexts, content learning is the primary objective. Aligning learning objectives to the curricula. Consider how differently you would teach a math class in EFL if students were going to be A, tested on their math comprehension versus B, tested on their English proficiency. Different learning objectives require very different types of curricula, syllabi, activities, and materials. CBI programs are more successful when the program curriculum, activities, and materials are aligned with the program objectives. If you want to teach something, you need to have materials and activities that meet your students at their current level of knowledge and ability. And these materials and activities should both challenge as well as guide students to learn more and improve their skills. While incidental learning is possible, it is not common. What this means for CBI is that if you want your students to learn both the language and the content, you need to focus on both. You need to provide your students sufficient support for both language learning and content learning. Finding this balance is one of CBI teachers' greatest challenges. Teachers, you probably will not be surprised to hear that the quality of teachers has a significant impact on the quality and success of CBI programs. CBI teachers must be able to keep students in the target language, provide effective feedback on both language and content, give students sufficient support to grasp new concepts introduced in class, give students enough linguistic support so that they can follow what is happening in class, and make sure that students control the language that they need to perform the tasks asked of them. Active learning. When learners play an active role in classroom activities, they perform better and learn more. Most teachers know this to be true, but it becomes very tempting to move to a teacher-centered style of teaching when it feels like there is too much material to cover. CBI teachers must learn how to keep their students active and give them a certain degree of autonomy. Anxiety reduction. Anxiety can negatively impact learning outcomes for both language and content. Thus, it is important for teachers to create an environment that is supportive and friendly. The classroom should be a place where students and teachers are sensitive towards each other's fears and insecurities and work collaboratively towards their well-being. Availability of resources. In an educational setting, teachers, learners, materials, and equipment are all considered as resources. CBI programs particularly need 1. Good collaboration among teachers, administrative staff, parents, and the community. 2. The allocation of required time and money. And 3. The availability of quality teaching materials such as textbooks. Since most places lack adequate financial support and time to procure or develop the required context-based teaching learning material, collaboration among the various stakeholders becomes essential to overcome this challenge. Conclusion. We have identified several factors that impact the success of CBI programs. Each one of these factors will be targeted in multiple activities throughout our course so that you, as a CBI teacher, will be able to take control of learning outcomes through decision-making and problem-solving throughout your career as a CBI teacher. Here are the references used to create this text.
Okay, let's continue. So the student, in conclusion, the student, the material, and the teacher are really important in order to have a successful class in CBI. Okay, let's continue. So it can be hard to find information sources and tests that lower level can understand. Also, the sharing of information in the target language may cause great difficulties. A possible way around this at lower level is either to use text in the student native language and then get them to use the target language for the sharing of information and end product. Right? That is a good idea. You know, you have your Spanish book researches in Spanish and then you switch to English. Okay, some students may copy directly from the sources text they use to get their information. Avoid this by designing tasks that demand students evaluate the information in some way to draw conclusion or actually to put it to some practical use. Having information sources that have conflicting information can also be helpful, as students have to decide which information they agree with or most believe. So in conclusion, while CBI can be both challenging and demanding for the teacher and the student, it can also be very stimulating and rewarding. The degree to which you adapt this approach may help a student on the willingness of your student, the institution in which you work, and the available or resources within your environment. It could be something that your school wants to consider instruction across the curriculum or something that you experiment with just for 1 or 2 lessons. So it's up to you to decide which one are you going to use. We have talked about many methodology or approach that you can use as a teacher in your classroom, but as I always say, you as a teacher have to decide which one is better for you and for your student, for your student. And remember that some students learn in different ways. So you have to identify which one is the best one for each student or for the whole class. So that's all for today. Thank you so much for listening and see you on Saturday. He terminado, mi amor.
Ok, profe, bueno, deseándole una buena noche y bueno, vamos a finalizar la sesión. Espero que los chicos se conecten y vean esta grabación en la plataforma. Y bueno, deseándole una buena noche a usted. Tenga una feliz y bendecida semana.
Hasta luego.